Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 179 for July 1st, 2024, as we rearrange screens at the last minute. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Our topic is, this will be part 4 and the last part of the Best of Strategy and Tactics magazine. We're going to cover the rest of the SPI goodies tonight. We got 18 games lined up. We are clipping Atlantic Wall. This is the big soapbox Atlantic Wall, Joe Belkowski design with some other participants. Game development by Stephen Ross, according to the box. I have not played this. I picked it up a couple years ago on eBay for a reasonable price, and it will now be clipped, organized, and verified to make sure that everything is here. And I see that we've got a lot of different kinds of units. This covers more or less the first like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month of the campaign. So the shelf gap behind me is where Atlantic Wall goes. You'll notice War in Europe's back on the shelf. There will be a Storage Solutions video about War in Europe, about how I stored that thing. That will be next Thursday. So just so everybody knows about that, I have 3 significant efforts in terms of video editing. Stuff's filmed, one of which is the Origins loot video, which is kind of a mess, and then the unboxing of The Greatest Day Utah Beach, which is kind of a mess, and all that stuff should be coming along shortly as soon as I get the editing done. The war, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that stuff in just a moment. So we are drinking Basil Hayden's because it's the closest bottle to empty, and I would like to reclaim the cork so I can recork that Jack Daniel's single barrel rye where I broke the cork on it. So we do have a giveaway this evening. It is an RPG item yet again. I may have some digital games to give away if I can figure out how to get those working. Where there's the engineers. Figure out how to get those codes I got from Slytherin working. So far, that's been a complete bust. But since last week, I haven't really fooled with it at all. So in general, I will say that I organize by publisher, but that's kind of not really the case. It's, I mean, just as true to say I organize by box size. Before we get to that, we would like to remind everybody to like the video if you haven't done so already. So thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. That would be awesome, depending, or follow, or whatever the platform you're on actually allows. We're sorting these by unit type for the moment, because I'm not going to try and verify while we are online here. That makes for a crappy content show. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair. Thank you, patrons, without whose support and encouragement it would be impossible to keep doing this. We'll have an update on that in a second. But also shout out to Noble Knight, the official sponsor of the Counterclipping show, and we'll hear from them later on in the show as well. Super chats and super stickers are on for those who would like to help support the show and or highlight their own comments, so I'm guaranteed to respond to a super chat or super stickered comment. I might otherwise miss it because we typically have lots of folks here. So getting into the armored, where did I put the armored divisions? There's the armored divisions, or armored battalions, I should say, battalion scale game. And there's a bunch of links to support the channel in the video description. So before we get any further, and I forget like I did last time, let's say hello to Alistair Logie, Darren Leveloff. Darren, thanks for stopping by. Dave Scott, David Imperato, David Zell, Egret, Eric Goebel, Eric Hansen, Grunyard, Rich, HUN644 New, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. David Imperato, B-Rad N, thanks for stopping by. The legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jason W., Jeff Beeler, Jeffrey Edwards, Joe Fast from sunny Northeast Ohio, and it is sunny here in Northeast Ohio today. Joe Hammond, John Friesen, welcome back to the show. Mr. John Longshore is here. Jonathan Dyer, Kyle Harris, Mark McNair, Meandering Mike, thanks for stopping by. Michael Evanzini, Panzer Division Lair, Paul Dangle, Paul Sin, Rob Johnson, Ron Nicholson. Ron, it's good to see you here. Ryan Huard, hopefully I'm getting that. I'm gradually learning how to not mispronounce that. Stacking Limit, Tim Greenhaw, Tim Zales, Vicky, thanks for stopping by. Vince Reeve, William Aarons, William Bird, and Winterson. We're already over 100 people here. So folks, thanks for coming out. So I do have, I don't have like any real wargaming news here, although I will observe that La Bataille de Wavre, which is not a standalone, it is an expansion, is available from Clash of Arms. And I checked their website, and it is actually available from their website. So Even though when you load their website, you will get a thing for Mont Saint Jean. WAV is available. So if you're interested in that, get in on it reasonably soon. I don't think it's going to sell out instantaneously, but it's not going to hang around forever either. It is an expansion. You do need Mont Saint Jean or Ligny and Quatre Bras to use it. I think that's the configuration it says on the order page. So it is not a standalone product. And then we do have an update on the campaign for the Finnish trilogy. Boom. We are there, folks. And here it is, part 3, volume 3 of the Finnish trilogy. This is probably the biggest contrast between what they charged for it, which bear in mind it was all store credit, and what came in the box, because there's not that much here. I checked it, it's all here. So all 3 volumes are in hand. I hope to bring content on the Finnish trilogy at some point, but it is extremely hard to get. They only printed a few hundred copies of each of these. So it really is kind of a grail piece for those of us who are interested in the topic. So I want to thank everybody who has helped out big time by using the Noble Knight affiliate link to buy the stuff they were going to buy at Noble Knight anyway, and shoot me a little store credit in the process. I am going to talk to my contact at Noble Knight about some kind of verification or validation that you've used an affiliate link when you put the order in, because right now that doesn't happen, and that is confusing some people, and I'm getting questions about it. So big shout out and thanks to everybody who has helped out with this. It did not really take very long at all. The performance of the affiliate business continues to astound me. And a big special shout out to the mysterious SW, who helped push this over the top at the last minute. So thank you, Steve, for the assistance in making this happen. So, and again, thanks for everybody. I will have another campaign after this. I will announce that in a week or two. In the meantime, the affiliate link, is still down in the video description, and feel free to use it. It helps the channel out. I can always fill in collection gaps. And the next one is going to be something that I don't think will surprise anybody, but which will also be a driver of future channel content. So it's going to be actually fairly exciting when it happens. So we did finish the Finnish trilogy, as we say. So yeah, there's, the boxes all match. They're all in. There's a ding on volume 2, I think, where like one of the edges, not the corner, oddly enough, corners split all the time. There's like a split edge on one of the boxes. Other than that, everything is in absolutely gorgeous condition. So if anybody wants to hop in on the Ardwulf, their Discord server, by the way, the link in the ticker was not updated once again this week. So send me an email. My email address is in there. If anybody wants to get in, I will send them a personalized invitation. So once again, thanks everybody for doing that. Everclear is a great way to get alcohol poisoning and end up in the hospital getting your stomach pumped. No, thank you. Carl Creeder from the Wargaming Bootcamp got it on pre-order for $125. But the other two after, second one was over $300. Yeah, all 3 of these were well over $300, I'm afraid. The price on these are not going down. This is, I actually considered this. However, and Red Poppies is really expensive now too. I didn't feel like I could justify it based on like audience. I don't know that how many people would be interested in seeing me grind up a copy for about almost $1,000 of Up Against the Wall Motherfucker, which is, I think, ultimately at this point a novelty piece. Although I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing what Jim Dunnigan, of all people, would have to say about that topic. Home Before the Leaves. So I know what the next campaign is going to be. I'm just not saying for another week or two. But it's Home Before the Leaves Fall is actually a very promising looking, and that was sort of on I don't really have a list for this, but it was sort of on my notional things that I considered. So I have the other 2 of these, and I think Noble Knight wants like $250 for the copy that they had last I checked. I feel like I'm not. But Red Poppies by Compass, it's the series is called Red Poppies. The first volume in the series is called Ypres, or the Battle for Ypres, or something like that. It's a really promising looking game. So, well, if Mr. Dunnigan would like to come on, I have, there has been a branch extended on that, and he just doesn't seem to really do that kind of thing anymore. So that would be an absolute coup if we could land Mr. Dunnigan. So, no, thank you. No, thank you. I have no particular beef against the Ticket to Ride games. I'm sure I've never played them, but I'm sure they are fun. I have generally tried to, I've had fun playing train games in general, and that looks like a train game that's not particularly abrasive. It's probably better designed than Empire Builder, for example, which I enjoyed, but which is a little hard to deal with because I think it takes too long to play. Stuka Joe, thanks, Joe. Joe, thanks for stopping by. We occasionally talk too fast and stumble around. So we're going to do magazine games again tonight, and this will probably be the last magazine game episode for a while until, as you've probably foreseen, we get around to the best of Against the Odds. I don't know if there's enough issues of Paper Wars with games in them to justify that for Paper Wars yet, but so I could totally get behind this, to be completely honest. I've got a pile of them already, so yeah, something like that. I felt like that was a bit on the high side, but awesome. Glad to hear it. I felt like that was a bit on the high side for what it is. I don't need it that bad. Even if it were to be a store credit thing, I feel like I'm not comfy with that price, considering that it's not that old. World of War magazine, there's about 80 issues of that, something like that. That's a possibility as well. And there are some pretty decent looking ones in World at War magazine as well. I think only maybe one of which I've played. Did I get? Okay, good. I have my one prop. I've actually busted a game out tonight. And if you think about it particularly hard, you'll probably figure out what that is. So let's get into it here. Trying to think if I had anything else to say preparatorily, and the answer is not really. So let me fix this, and we're going to start talking about SPI S&T games. So all these are going to be SPI, and I found an error in my list that I've been working off of, by the way, which is ultimately comes from BGG data, but I'm working on it in a spreadsheet of my own, and I screwed something up, and something that was not SPI at all was listed as being SPI. But the game we have here is the American Civil War. This is a 74 release. It's a Jim Dunnigan design. This came out in S&T number 43, Hobby Japan magazine. So this would be a really good, or Command magazine for that matter. This would be a good idea, but I don't feel qualified to do this, at least at this point. So if I was going to do that, Ryan, thanks for stopping by. I can always catch up on the replay. So I expect this to be showing up anytime as well. So yeah, exactly. I've got the other two. I'll try the other two. I mean, I don't know how much I'll like it. It looks promising, but I don't know how much I'll like it. And for $275, I'm just as happy to experiment with the other two before I jump on that particular grenade. What game is the map? Are we talking about the map on my background? It's probably the same one I've had up for years, actually. Oh, very good. There is the CSR sale. We mentioned this last week over at MMP. For, as I recall, Storm Over Jerusalem, On to Richmond 2, and Valley of Tears. I cannot personally vouch for Storm Over Jerusalem, although it looks good, but I can absolutely vouch for the other two, which are outstanding. So, so if you think about it, I mean, we're pushing 300 issues from Decision at this point. It's not quite that much. It's probably about 250. So there's a lot of games there, and there's some good ones. I mean, not all the SPI S&T games are good either. So, Carl, thanks for stopping by. But, you can't win them all. And based on the magazine publication schedule, that's the big challenge for magazine games, to be honest, is they have a kind of a deadline because they're talking to a magazine distributor. I don't know to what extent that's still a problem nowadays, to be completely honest. Here is an armored recon battalion or company. I don't have an extra compartment to put this in, so we'll have to figure it out. Screw it. I'll put it in there for now. So American Civil War. I really like this sort of minimalist Simonson cover here. I think this is actually quite strong. This was available in a flat, unless I'm very much mistaken. I do think that this is a pretty strong, punchy cover, even if it doesn't have a fancy graphic on it. And in fact, is kind of a case study of why maybe you don't need the fancy graphics. See also Traveler. And I mentioned we're going to have a giveaway tonight. We're going to have a giveaway tonight as well. Wargame Design Studio John Tiller games are on sale. This might be worth a look. The interface on these is horrendous, but they are legit computer war games. So in any case, the map on here, I mean, this is 1974, so bear in mind that this map is fairly rudimentary. I will observe, just as a humorous aside, that there is no giant forest in Kansas, but you only get like 1 hectare of Kansas on the map too. This is looks like self-propelled guns. There's all kind of stuff I can't identify here. We'll put these here for now. It'll be fine. We will be using, I think, the same organizational method for Atlantic Wall here that we did with War in Europe. So I picked this up at Compass Expo last year, and I would like, since I am now a Civil War buff, I would like to give this a shot. I doubt very seriously that this is going to stand up to more robust simulations like Victory Games Civil War, or even something like, crap, what's the Frank Chadwick thing called again? A House Divided. I can never pull this name. This name, because I've never had the game, this name just does not want to pop out of my head on the spot. So I think this is not going to stand up to certainly the more serious games on the topic, like Victory Games Civil War, or U.S. Civil War, or Mark Herman's For the People, or even A House Divided. But nevertheless, again, we got a Dunnigan design from the early 70s. This is probably worth a look. So some of us, I think the music is probably not that great. I bet just about anything beats. So I'd be curious to, not curious enough for it to occupy space on my personal shelves. So nobody send it to me, but I would be curious to see, since basically almost everything else that FGA did was a ripoff of something. Usually it was SPI. I'm curious to know what Brother Against Brother was a ripoff of. So, except they then didn't playtest anything. So this looks intriguing. It's not a top tier at 6.0. You can tell. We will be going up in rankings here as we proceed through the list. But I think it does. I'll show you the counters as well. I think these counters are quite punchy and look really good, and especially considering that this is, I mean, there's not tons and tons of numbers or factors on here or anything. But I think these counters look really nice for 1974. These fort markers are a little weird, if you ask me, but other than that, no. We won't be doing that. The only one that's a little bit tempting would be the Eagle in the Sun, because I think what you might be able to do is you just basically throw everything away except the maps and the counters, and use the maps and the counters to play War in the Pacific. I think that's possible. And I will complain about one thing about War in the Pacific. Having not played it yet, it's on the to-do list eventually. Is the names of the ships aren't on the counters. There's a list of them. The quote-unquote pennant numbers are on there. But yeah, so this has been redone a couple of times, but I don't think at least once, I think twice actually. I don't think either revision of this is close enough to justify the name revision of this, right? At least that's my impression. I also am inclined, so I think we should kind of have some perspective on magazine games right now. It's harder now to have perspective on magazine games because the magazine with the game in it now costs about $50, which is not cheap. But I haven't tried to do an inflation calculation to see if the cost in, say, 1975 compared. That it's possible that it does, or maybe it doesn't. But tanks, where'd the tanks go? Where did the tanks go? We should have some. Remember that the kind of the point of S&T specifically, at least back in the day, was to be able to do games that stretched the borders of what was possible, right? The idea was to be experimental, right? In that context, not every one of these works, right? A lot of them have significant issues and suffered from, maybe could have been play tested longer. SPI play tested stuff. There's no debate about that. But this is kind of true too. And I have kind of mixed feelings about that, right? On the one hand, I'd like people to be able to experiment, right, with small format games, and you know, I could, maybe I'm an outlier here nowadays, but I consider a magazine game to be basically a small war game, or at least small-ish. Some are less small than others, of course, but Ron Nicholson picked this up as a freshman in college and found it to be superior to Milton Bradley's Battle Cry. That's probably not a surprise. I want to say those Milton Bradley games, that series that included Battle Cry, I want to say these are glider troops, okay? I want to say those appeared in the 50s or something like that, maybe the 60s. So, I mean, we're talking pretty old games here. So you'll see a couple of these, by the way, that have been resurrected or are about to be resurrected. So I agree with Hissycat here in that I think it's a good idea to cut magazine games a little slack. But what that might end up meaning in the long run is you don't buy them because you think they're too expensive to take a chance. And I can understand that perspective as well. So, all right. So moving on, The Fall of Rome. This is a designed by the late John Young, who passed away, left SPI, went to California, and then passed away, I want to say, in some kind of motorcycle accident or something like that. This was a real loss to Wargaming. He did some very interesting things in the time he was with SPI. So, Commando Solo 193 mentions Battle for Germany, which started as an S&T game and is now, you know, had many lives. John Stanley has done the calculation for me. So $8.56 and $1975. I'm not sure what the magazine cost back then, though. That's the thing. I suspect it wasn't quite $8.56. Darren Lovelove loves magazine games, history and gaming, and the magazine, whatever the flaws the games might have, the magazine has always been fantastic. I'd be buying the magazine if I wasn't getting the ones with the games in them. So, this was redone again, though. I'm not sure. Do we have a remake on this? No. Well, it says there's a 1997 Joe Miranda design. This is another one of the situations, though, where regardless of what the basic concepts might be the same, I'd be inclined to say, without closely examining either game, that it's probably not close enough for me to consider it a revision, right? More like a total redesign. So this is another thing here, and Stuka Joe has it, and this was in my notes for this game. I believe this is S&T number 39, by the way. I believe this is as far as I know, if somebody's got an earlier example, I'd love to know about it. As far as I know, this is the first solitaire war game. And that alone makes it very noteworthy, especially given the prominence of solitaire games nowadays. So now I've seen Avalon Hill Civil War, and now we're not talking about victory games. I mean Avalon Hill Civil War, not victory game Civil War, which is a marvelous game. Avalon Hill Civil War, it doesn't look that good to me. And the red and blue pawns is Avalon Hill Civil War. So Mike Reed and I are talking about the same game. Yeah, I have to look into this, exactly what that includes. But yeah, there's some kind of digital service available from Decision as well. I mean, I think this is, you're gonna provoke Stigler on this topic, Mike. But I think I am uninclined to like make some kind of moral judgment about the people at Decision Games, because they have done this, and I think it is a problem. But they do appear now to have recognized that it is a problem. In terms of managing customer expectations, as far as, okay, we've redone a game called Atlantic Wall, right? We even have a cover on that box that's sort of inspired by this cover, except not as good. And it's a mistake to say it's a completely different game, but it's a completely different game. So this is pretty good. This is pretty good. So I agree with Stigler on this. I just don't want to read more into it than is going on. I think it's that to some extent, Decision is kind of between a rock and a hard place when talking about the SPI library, because on the one hand, they can redo a game and fix the problems, and then people will complain that they changed it. And on the other hand, they can redo a game and just straight reprint, and they've done both of these things. And in addition to complete redesigns using the same old name, and people will complain that they didn't fix the original's problems. So they are in kind of a tough spot here. So Harris here for the giveaway. No, Dan, you didn't win. We haven't done the giveaway yet. Besides, you're not a person that would appreciate this giveaway. You might be, actually, but I don't know. But Dan, thanks for coming by. Dan's on the show with Dan tomorrow. We will have Mr. Carl Paradis, by the way, who I've been looking forward to talking to for a while, and Dan has finally made it happen. So I have said in the past, for the record, that Dan does more of the legwork on getting the guests than I do. I do get some of the guests, but Dan does more of the legwork than I do. Michael Evanzini says, subscribe to both without the games, then buy the games. This is completely logical. The magazines are worth reading on their own. The magazine has always been top notch, as far as I'm concerned. So, and Ron Nicholson has his SPI lifetime subscriber certificate at TSR. Do you have the letter saying "fuck you" from TSR along with that S&T lifetime subscriber certificate? I'm not sure, Ron, if you're joking or not. That might actually be worth something. I don't know, but it might be. I believe Carl has a number of hot buttons that we may elect to not push or not, as the case may be. So in any case, the Fall of Rome. Now, this was redone in 1997, according to BGG. And this was in a flat as well. And it's not a horrific looking game. I mean, this map's pretty rudimentary, but again, it's 1973. What do you want? Right? So, but the counters are not too bad. These are the original counters, I believe. I don't think I have this one. I have Americans. I'll also shout out whether I have one of these or not, or whether I'm trying to get one of these. But this is one I don't believe that I have. I might be wrong, because we are at that point now where I'm sometimes wrong about what I have, which coincidentally is why there's a giveaway today. So that's that. So moving on from that, we have Road to Richmond. Now this is a fifth wheel game, and for those who don't know, when we say there's a fifth wheel, usually we're talking about a quad and then an additional game using that system that appeared in the magazine before or after the quad. So Road to Richmond is the fifth wheel from Blue and Gray, maybe both Blue and Gray quads. And it does not look awesome, I got to tell you. I did, by the way, I got a cheap one on eBay. It's fairly beat up, but I did get a cheap TSR Blue and Gray on eBay, so I'll at least be able to comment a little more intelligently on that system. I don't expect it to overthrow any of the other Civil War systems that I like. However, it's a different scale, and therefore it's kind of an apples and oranges thing, right? I mean, I think there's value in a Civil War game where I can play out, say, Antietam in 2 hours, right? And this could be the whole 7 days battle. I'm not entirely sure. It kind of looks like it is, but that also implies that it's somewhat operational, which would kind of make sense given the scale of the Blue and Gray quad, right? So, okay. Jeff Beeler says, design wargames for SPI, most famous for using the word grognard to describe veteran wargamers in the 1970s. One wonders if I suspect that term was floating around before that, but I could be wrong too. He might have come up with that. Darren Leveloff says that the problem with DG, the magazines, is that they don't cover gaming, just the history, whereas ATO, C3, and Paperwork have articles on gaming. So I think, Darren, that you'll find someone who agrees with you here in Harold Buchanan, who has expressed similar sentiments. Okay, and I kind of agree with that, but at the same time, I also recognize that this has always been the way Strategy and Tactics has been. It's been a military history magazine that happens to have a game in it. And occasionally there'll be a game article or gaming article in it, but it's primarily military history stuff. And I think that won't change because it is now sold independently of the game on newsstands. So I don't think they'll change that. I don't have a real problem with that, though. And I also like the breadth of coverage in S&T because there's frankly a lot of weird stuff in there that I would otherwise not know anything about. So my barber is whatever supercuts or great clips. I have no idea where I even go for haircuts. It's either supercuts or great clips or super chops, or I forget. I can never remember the name of it, but it's a big chain and it's convenient and it's reasonably cheap. So Mike Reed mentions the deluxeified treatment. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games did get, what the hell is this? Oh, it's airborne artillery. And a Mystic. Yeah, I do think there's some significant similarities here between the Blue and Gray rules and Napoleon at Waterloo. They're both designed to be incredibly digestible. Alistair says that his copy of Road to Richmond has crappy registration. This is one that I would get if I find it for $10 or less unpunched. That is not an impossible ask, by the way. But otherwise, I don't feel like I really need it as such. So, Brant, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you later. So this is a great idea. So, well, yeah, I think, I mean, I would assume we're all aware of the provenance of the term. I don't know when it began to be applied to wargamers. And remember that role-playing people also use this term as well in, I think, a more negative context than wargamers mean it. Usually there's a certain amount of, well, I mean, it does mean grumbler after all. So it's etymologically, it probably shouldn't be read as an entirely positive label. But wargamers have more or less embraced it. And I'm also pretty comfortable with that. Another project is to get the Tweezer Mafia t-shirts done, by the way. So Road to Richmond, this is one of those covers where, hey, at least I can read the title. So it's not the greatest cover, but I think it's fairly effective, again, because the title pops out. Redmond Simonson was really good at this, and I don't know what happened with Breitenfeld, because Breitenfeld does not do that. And this is S&T number 60, by the way. So this is 1977. So we're kind of getting into, like, the second half of SPI's lifetime. Next up is Veracruz, the Mexican War. This is a Richard Berg game. I have this. It is punched. I want to say it came from Fucko. And it's an intriguing topic. I have never played a game on this topic. So at some point, I am going to give this a shot. I don't know who the developer was, and it's not mentioned here. I did not think to pull it off the shelf to find out. So, where's the artillery? There's the artillery. But yeah, I'm waiting for him too. I gotta actually talk to Ed anyway, so I will inquire. He's not working for that part of the company anymore, so I don't know that he will have any information. But he should have more information than I do. So, I will bring you a video when those are close, and I am impressed with the Aegis magazine trays. So, there are definitely people, especially that one dude on Facebook, who literally jumps in anytime anything Richard Berg was even peripherally connected with, jumps into the thread to talk about how much he hates Richard Berg. I am not that guy. I like a lot of Berg's designs, while acknowledging that sometimes Berg overdid it in his Berginess. I don't know anything about where this falls on the spectrum of Berginess, okay? But it is supposed to be a decent game. I would like to try it. And this came out of S&T 63, so also 1977. It's not an awful looking game. We've got, and in fact, I would love to, mine's punched. I would love to have this counter sheet because this is beautifully registered almost everywhere. And the color is really well preserved as well. So, Hexy, if I haven't said, thanks for stopping by. Also I'm gonna remind folks that it is pretty inexpensive to pick up old for the most shit that went in the wrong container. It's generally fairly inexpensive to pick up old S&Ts, SPI S&Ts. Generally, there are exceptions, but they 20, 30 plus thousand of these went into circulation. So there should be a fair number in circulation, and they're not hard to get unpunched. My general benchmark price for an unpunched SPI S&T is about $10. That is a good price. 15 to 20 would be a reasonable, 15 to 25, say, would be a reasonable price. Above that, barring certain games, Flight of the Gerbon, for example, goes for absolute bug nuts money, and I have no idea why. I also love the matte finish counters. I don't know how well they wear, but we're going to find out because we're going to be getting to some SPI stuff before too long here. So, I'm not even talking about, and it could be because Berg was a very thorny fella, and his personal interactions with people may have been a factor in the sort of rabidity that some folks expressed toward Berg. I had very little interaction. I may have exchanged, we may have driven by each other on Facebook once or twice, and that was it. So, and I probably met him at one point at an old Origins and just didn't recognize who he was at the time. But I knew who Richard Berg was even at the time, right? I'm very interested in seeing what the campaigns in Europe is like. So we'll bring you that coverage as soon as possible. I will say that I find that the SPI counters clip better with the deluxe clipper, and that is because they are not necessarily quite as perfectly square as most modern counters. That said, I am not using the deluxe clipper because I am way faster with the non-deluxe clipper. So this is plausible too. But remember, we had also Berg in print in such things as Berg's Review of Games. So Berg was a force to be reckoned with, right? In any case, Veracruz is on the to-do list. It's not super duper high on the to-do list. But it is on the to-do list. Here is the Kaiser's battle. I want to say this is the same. Nope, this is not the same system. This is very, very late SPI. This is S&T number 83. So this is in 1980, according to BGG. But it might have been on the edge of 81, too. So, you're losing me on the acronym here, ITW. So I can tell you that that New England Simulations likes the Milt's the guy that designed Jaws of Victory. New England Simulations likes the flat finish counters too, and I do too. We talked about that when we unboxed the iLoud game. The folks at Thin Red Line also use a matte finish, but in their case, it's a coating of some kind, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it can require a little bit of extra care when you're clipping the counters because it tends to leave little thready residues. So, hey, you know what? You should consider this a badge of honor to have been labeled by Richard Berg. So that's a very interesting hill for Richard Berg to die on. But you know what? He picked a lot of very interesting hills. Let's put it that way. I would like to try this at some point. It's just not super high priority. It might be an interesting idea to try it on Utah Beach, actually. So some of the more recent GMT ones have had a bit of a flatter finish. I wouldn't call them flat, but they're flatter, and I like that. So, I mean, different people are going to interact with other people in ways that vary based on their own personalities, right? So if it's, let me try and, I'm making a small adjustment here. There we go. That didn't do a friggin' thing. Okay. Anyway, different people interact with different people differently, and that sounds vapid, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, some people are just going to rub me the wrong way, and I will rub some people the wrong way, for example, and that's just going to happen. But if you get to know that person, maybe you'll cut them a lot more slack. So that is possible. All right. So the Kaiser's battle is World War I, Western Front, 1918. This is a Joe Balkowski and Jay Nelson design. I believe the provenance on this is Balkowski as the designer and Jay Nelson as the developer, I think. Do we have a good image of the map? Yeah, actually we do. So you can see it. This is not the most striking. Not the most striking SPI map I've ever seen. And this rendition is pretty yellow. But let's look at what we're talking about on, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes the counters super duper hard to read, doesn't it? This is not one I have, obviously. And to be completely honest, I feel like these counters are kind of a big turnoff. I mean, you can kind of see what they are, right? They're NATO symbols. And we can see here, actually, we're going to see infantry right here. And these are presumably shock troops. And then we've got a bunch of infantry. I don't see anything for armor, which we might need in this particular situation, but I'm not sure. So interesting topically. If I was going for a game on this topic, though, I'd probably be much more inclined to go with Ted Racer's 1918 Storm in the West, which was an old Command Magazine game that was reprinted by GMT a few years ago. That should still be available. I don't think so. I like Mahaffey as an artist, as a cartographer of maps that you're supposed to play games on. He is, I think, a little less effective. So moving on, the flight. Here's the I don't know why this thing goes for a lot of money. The flight of the Gerbon. This is World War I naval operations. It's kind of an infamous thing where the Gerbon shoots around the Mediterranean and eventually ends up with the Turks, I believe. It's an intriguing looking game. This is looks like a slightly retouched version of the map. This is super duper early. This is what, 71? This is 1970. I'm pretty sure this map was originally black and white. Nijo Green says, To the Greenfields Beyond may have been the most interesting World War I game from SPI. That might be right. Is that the Marne? Am I right about that? That's an interesting looking game, and it's one that I'm kind of waffling on. I like some of the art I've seen. I like it from an art standpoint. I've liked almost everything from Mahaffey that I've seen. From a I can't see where the friggin' hexes are standpoint, that's a little bit of a different story, and that is problematic. So Jeff Beeler says this was the first operational naval game. So yeah, so I mean, this is, I don't understand. This goes for, I don't know if it goes for this much, but this goes for high change on eBay too. And it's not like, now admittedly, this is S&T number 21, okay? So this is, if I'm counting it right, like the 5th issue that they put games in. So I don't believe they have 35,000 subscribers at this point. So that it's early is certainly got to be a factor. But remember, this was also published in the flat, and I'm just not sure. Let's see what the BGG marketplace looks like on this. But I'm not sure how a price that high is justified. But you can see good condition, $108. Good condition in Canada, $175. But that's Canadian, so that's like $75. But yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with this. Is this like a masterpiece? Does anybody know? Yes, but I don't believe it's the same game. Once again, I think this is another one that they redid. We don't have a re-implemented buy here, unfortunately, but we can always do this. This is going to be. This is the game Joe's talking about. Cool cover. No, this looks totally different. This is totally different. Yeah, this is a point-to-point map. But we also have, what is this other one here? Escape of the Gerbon. By Minden Games. Okay, that's interesting. Two-player tactical World War II game. Extends the Jellicoe versus Shear game. Okay, so that sounds like miniatures rules to me. Yeah, this does not look at even vaguely similar. Oh, that's interesting. Hindenburg's War was one I was tempted to check out. Sometimes Joe revises an older game, and it's recognizably the older game. It doesn't look like that's the case here, however. Rogue77, thanks for stopping by. And of course, we'll still be here on the replay as well. So anyway, yeah, no clue what's going on with the pricing on Flight of the Gerbon. Doesn't make any sense to me. Presumably, it makes sense to somebody, but I don't believe that it is a masterpiece that everybody wants because it's so good. This is damn early. Tony Morale and David Williams. I am unfamiliar with the work of either of those gentlemen. So a set of larger ship counters and miniatures rules are also included. That's intriguing. So, good question is did this even in its original publication, did this have mounted counters? Because the first few S&T games did not. This looks kind of meaty, to be honest about it. So, in any case, yeah, I'm not sure. Well, as a solitaire game, I kind of get that. But remember, they're not shipping 35,000 copies of these out anymore as well. So, oh, that's interesting. Is that actually in the Guns of August? Is that the book in which this event is related? This makes perfect sense for that system, though. But I have zero interest in like operational / tactical World War I naval. Outside of maybe a specific battle, like I could see playing Jutland, for example, or Tsushima, for that matter, for the pre-World War I folks. But although that would probably be rather unfun for the Russians, but at the same time, I'm not sure what's going on with this particular game. This incredibly primitive-looking game. Yeah, 73 for the flat pack. I do not trust BGG on dates on the different versions at all. I've seen them screw this up too many times. So yeah, I know no clue what's going on with this. However, if you see this at a flea market, I went to the flea market this weekend. There were 0 games there. I did buy 8 Patrick O'Brien books for $3 a piece. However, grab this if you see it for a reasonable price. Here's another one. Now, I had this on my wish list for a while, and this one goes a little bit on the high side too. Not nearly as high as Flight of the Gerbon. This is USN. This is from S&T number 29, so it's a little bit later. And oops, apartment once again. This is a game that's fairly well regarded, but this was redone there's a flat version of this. Was there a boxed version of this? I didn't think so. And then Decision, yeah. So there's a white flat and a black flat version of this. And then Decision later on did USN Deluxe, and that is actually the one that I have. It is my understanding that there are some differences between the games between the magazine version and the flat pack version. And there's definitely differences in the Decision USN Deluxe, which expands this system to basically cover the entire Pacific War or close to it. This is a well-regarded game, and some folks that whose opinions I respect greatly on this, on war games on this topic specifically, point this out as a solid game. That's why I picked up the Decision version. Kind of like to have the original, but maybe I'd kind of like the flat instead. So this is another one of those things. I really don't need it because I have the update, which is a situation in which I think it's an update of the original, right? And USN Deluxe is Joe Miranda, right? Joe Miranda and Michael Myers. So apparently there's some serial killing involved as well. So the artist, Masahiro Yamazaki. I think, though, that once again, we've just put pennant numbers on the counters, and I think there's no excuse for this in 2000. What is this, 2004? 2004. I think there's no excuse for that in 2004. That's not a major complaint, but it is slightly annoying. Michael Avanzini has been collecting since the early 70s and have all of them from issue 22 to 150. That's a lot of stuff. That is a lot of content. I would go so far as to say that is a veritable lifetime of gaming right there, right? I wouldn't be... I'd have to think harder about that to see if I think a World War II system would port well to Jutland, which is, there's a whole chase find the Bismarck thing going on with the Bismarck, which is not as decisive a factor in Jutland, for example. So I don't know if that's feasible or not. But if you look at USN Deluxe, it's 2 maps and covers basically the entire Pacific. Now, I don't think this is replacing Pacific War either, but I'm told it's got some pretty interesting things on it. I suppose, but then I'm not doing that. I'm not that crazy. Operation Olympic, another Dunnigan design. This one is from S&T number 45 from 1974, another striking Redmond Simonson cover. This is the hypothetical part of the hypothetical invasion of Japan. Now, this was redone. Is there a re-implemented by? There is. We'll take a look at that in a second. So this was re-implemented, and I don't know a lot about the re-implementation as Olympic and Coronet later, which I think was a magazine game. This is a pretty interesting looking game. It's hypothetical. Hypothetical, as you probably are aware, not necessarily something I'm hugely big on. The map looks fine. It's pretty straightforward, but this is, after all, what did I say, 1974? I did say 1974. The counters look good, I think, as long as you got ones that are registered well. I think you'll be... Where'd my water go? There we go. I think you'll be fine with these counters. So one of the attractions in, what's it called? Absolute Victory is that there is an actual map for Antarctica. Yeah, Jack's got a number of things in the works with VUCA, so that is worth having Jack on the Chit Show would be a great idea. So. Yeah, so I mean, this looks fine, but if you look at Olympic and Coronet, this design credit here is all over the place. Christopher Cummins, that's Doc. Jim Dunnigan, Redmond Simonson, Joe Youst. I don't trust that. This is, was this original a solitaire game? I didn't think so. It says nothing about that here. This says solitaire game, but it is on a hex grid, if nothing else. So, yeah, no kidding. I mean, that would have been super duper bloody. This map looks great. I mean, I'll tell you that. The counters look fine. Other than that, but this is solitaire. I mean, that's telling me, it says it's an update of Operation Olympic, but it also says it's a solitaire game. But it says the original is too. Who knows this? Who knows the answer to this? One to two players, best one. All right, so we're taking this as a solitaire game. This is a hex grid too, though. That's possible. I'd have to take a closer look at this, and this is not one that I've taken a closer look at to know if this is. I'm at this point. I've been spending enough. I spent a month and a half pawing through War in Europe, so. Well, I'm not ready to go to play it. A lot of it did come back to me as I was going through components, but I've never really looked closely at this because, again, it's hypothetical and that's technically not something I'm super into. But again, if somebody was to say, "Hey, I will sell you my unpunched S&T number, whatever, for $7," then I'll be happy to buy it. So I'm at heart a cheapskate. This was a boxed game, by the way, or at least a magazine game. Was not. No, they did it in. Okay. So there's a folio version. That's the one that's pictured here. But the redo originally appeared in World at War magazine. And it might be one of the more highly regarded World at War magazine games. It might make that list when we do that list. All right. Next up is another fifth wheel game. This is Siege of Constantinople. It's a Richard Berg design, and this is sort of the fifth wheel for the Art of Siege. However, now Sea Lion, well, there's the SPI Sea Lion, and there's the recent decision Sea Lion. Okay, let me say that correctly. There's the recent decision Sea Lion, and there's the original SPI CeeLo, and I don't think they're the same at all. I've got the recent decision one. So this is kind of the fifth wheel, but that says, what does that mean when we talk about Art of Siege? Because there's really multiple different systems in that box. And I think this is also different, although it thematically fits with the rest of Art of Siege. I'm not sure how close it sticks to any of the systems that are present in the parent game. This, nevertheless, is reasonably well regarded. So, and you can see the prices on some of these, right? 25, 17, 29, not insane amounts of money. And let's look at the counters. Do I have this one? I don't think I do. You can see that this is a hex map. Not all the games in Art of Siege have hex maps, right? This is a very rudimentary map, right? Let me put it that way. And here are the counters in a lurid orange and purple. And what would this be? 1453. Yeah. Okay. So interesting topically. Siege games are a bit rare. So it looks really good, actually. So this might be the case. This is the challenge with siege games, right? Is the perception, at least, is that they are in fact dull as ditchwater. So, and yes, I would imagine that this to be the case, right? If we go back here, let's get there we go. I mean, a big chunk of this is water on the map, right? And so the sense of, hey, the naval part of it is kind of important, and maybe we should have that in here is another point. But you're not going to be using any of that inner city, I wouldn't think, right? So that's airborne. These are, let's say small counters. You weren't able to see that unless I'm projected on a huge TV. But in any case, fairly interesting looking game. I don't have Art of Siege. We'll see if I feel the need to run this down or not. In general, siege games are out. Have never really been in vogue. Siege of Jerusalem is one of the rare siege games that people seem to feel is really very good. All right, so let me pull this down for a moment, and we will talk about the giveaway. What we will be giving away. If you, like me, are a fan of Mr. Seth Skorkowski, he's just started a video series. We'll be hearing from Noble Knight in a minute. I'll pick that up. One of my trays just hit the floor. One of these trays. It's not that big of a deal. He is doing a multi-part review of Secrets of the Ancients, which he is running right now, and I am giving this away tonight because I am a dope and I bought one at Origins, and I already had it. So my loss is your gain here, folks. So if we want to win Secrets of the Ancients, it's a big fat hardcover. It's a very nice book, written by updated by Martin Doherty from the original Mark Miller Secrets of the Ancients. This is a whole campaign. It's a big campaign set in the official Traveler universe. If you are interested in that, you are going to hit #Traveler. So #Traveler, and you can win this very fine product. Last week's, I got the thing packed up and the label paid for and everything the next day, and I didn't get it out till today. So pardon me while I pick some of this stuff up. I will give everybody a couple of minutes. We will now hear from our good friends at Noble Knight, the official sponsor of the Counterclipping Show.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, so thank you, Noble Knight Games and Hashtag Traveler for the giveaway. And I will have, again, some digital games if I can figure those out. So I don't have any Traveler Tuesday material planned at the moment, but Traveler will, of course, feature relatively heavily in the Origins loot video. I bought more RPG stuff at Origins than I did Wargaming stuff. If you think about it, that's not particularly surprising because I am much less behind on Wargames than I am on RPG stuff. A huge chunk of what I picked up for RPGs was just Traveler odds and ends that I needed and stuff from Chaosium odds and ends that I needed. And then I impulse bought a couple of things as well. So I'll talk about all that in the loot video. And we got 28 entries already. So, Charles Latour mentions that he has the Ziploc version, 2 games, no magazine. Well, there you go. Twitch, yeah, I think it'll work. Did you put hashtag? It should work as long as you're, as you hit hashtag Traveler, it should work. So I see your comment here. So you should be eligible. That's one of the advantages. Is anybody? I don't think it'll work on Twitter, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It should work on Facebook, however. So right now we have 123 viewers on YouTube, 51 on Twitter, 3 on Twitch, and 0 on Facebook. All of that is fairly typical, except that the Twitch number is higher than usual. Usually it's 1. So, and if you put in more than once, it will only count to once. So that's why I like the StreamYard giveaway tool, because I don't have to think too hard about it. I think now that I have at least one compartment that's just all messed up, I'm just going to clip mindlessly and throw them in the bin and then stick them in a baggie and sort them out later. It'll be fine. So, in any case, I have not run this even in the original Little Black Book version, by the way, but it looks I have read through it, and it does look pretty good. They have also done a prequel campaign and a sequel campaign. The sequel is called Wrath of the Ancients, and the prequel is called Mysteries of the Ancients. So, and of course, Traveler is the greatest role-playing game of all time, but it's not like there are other role-playing games. So, this is plausible. Or if I had, if I were a scantily dressed lady, but nobody wants to see me scantily dressed, that's for sure. People will pay me to not do that. So, nobody wants to see that. In fact, if I were to remove my shirt right now, the authorities might be called. So I would prefer not. I'm pretty sure it won't work if you put anything else. Just hashtag Traveler, boom. The pronunciation, it should not be case sensitive. So, or I'm more concerned about arrested, to be honest. But yeah, nobody wants to see that. So, flabby old man with no shirt. No, thank you. There are people, including people in gaming spaces, that's their shtick, is they film their videos with wearing no shirt. I cannot endorse this behavior. It is weird. So, this would be the literal worst rap in the history of rap. So, we won't be doing that either. So, we'll give this another couple of minutes, and then we will get back into the last 8 games from the best of S&T. We won't capture absolutely everything, but we'll capture an important one that I'll have stuff to say about. So there's more than one important one, but there's one I personally have stuff to say about. So this was more information than anyone was looking for, John. Thank you very much. So this is definitely a TMI type of situation. This is another one where people will pay Dan to not do that on the internet. So Possibly. That is possible. More like singular. We'll give this another 2 minutes. Hashtag Traveler to win this glorious copy of the book. I threw counters all over the place and now I can't find it. At least I didn't drop the book, which is Secrets of the Ancients from Mongoose Publishing. It's really nice. I just have 2 of them because I bought an extra one for some reason. So it is MSRP on this is $49.99. Yep, it is. So Studio 2 had a lot of cool stuff. You can't buy it all, right? But you can ogle it all, and I ogled quite a bit of it. There's I forget what it's called, Fate of the Norns or something like that. Is a kind of a cool Viking-themed game I saw that I was tempted by. And I remember being scared off by the price tag a couple years ago when I saw it, and then I looked at the price tag this year, and it seemed absolutely conventionally priced. So probably inflation has had something to do with that. There's also a new edition, it's not new anymore, a recent-ish edition of Fading Suns. It's a setting I like. I don't really like the system that's ever been with the game, but there's that. Well, this is not the only example of me accidentally acquiring duplicate Traveler materials. Mike Welker, in fact, and I had a little trade where I traded him a bunch of out-of-print Classic Traveler and maybe some other stuff and a couple of war games type of thing. So so thanks, Mike. I was able to dump a lot of excess duplicate Traveler product in exchange for Le Grand Guerre. So, which is, if its rarity is anything to go by, is really very reasonably priced in a lot of places, to be honest about it. I mean, it usually goes for somewhere under $300. I think I have this as well. Was this one, Jeff, that they published on the website or in? They had a digital magazine at one point called Signs and Portents, and a lot of material, including I think the original Pirates of Drenax, was released in that, and a lot of that stuff was available on their website for a long time. Yes, you could buy them on eBay. There's the old Martian Metals 15mm miniatures. There's check out Second Dynasty. They do some 3D printable Traveler miniatures. If you have a 3D printer, they may be selling the physical miniatures as well. There may be other sources for Traveler miniatures as well, but I'm unclear as to where those might be. So all right, it is up. We're going to hit the button here, folks. We got 44 entries, which is not super duper high, but I'm okay with it because it's not a war game item. So let's see. And once again, if you win and you're in the U.S., I will cover the shipping. If you are not in the U.S., I will ask you to split the shipping. This is, why did you put in for this? Are you interested in this at all? I mean, this is like the perfect win for me because I can just drive down to Columbus and hand it to him. But if you're interested in this, it's yours. But if you are not interested in this, then I'll re-roll. Let me know, please. So the winner is the legend himself, Mr. Fucko. We got a field trip out to WBC pretty soon as well, by the way. That is only a few weeks away at this point. So if he doesn't say anything, he's getting it. So remember, folks, I'm not giving this away out of the generosity of my heart. I'm giving it away also because I would like it it is now a duplicate that I would like out of my hair. So I don't want to have, he says re-roll it. All right, we're going to re-roll it. Shit, do we have to have people put, all right. Okay, it worked. That worked. It took a second to catch up to all the entries, so let's see who actually wins. And like I said, if he wanted it, I'd give it to him, but Marty Sample wins. Okay, Marty, shoot me your address, Marty, and I will get it out to you. Thankfully, I don't have to ask you if you live in some foreign country or not, so congrats, Marty. It is a nice product, and if you're into Traveler, it is a whole self-contained campaign with classic roots, so congrats, Mr. Marty. Let's see. Ooh, this sounds interesting. Largest reenactment of the Battle of Jutland was held at the U.S. Naval War College, May 2016. So I wish, this is too close to this is too close to SD HistCon. Otherwise, I might say yes to this. Maybe next year. I will probably, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll have such a fabulous time at SD HistCon that I can't say no to going back. But it's also on the other side of the country, so there's a certain convenience factor. If I wasn't doing anything else at that time, I would be delighted to go. It is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, unless it's moved recently. So Marty, ardwulfslair@gmail.com. You've got my email address anyway, so just send me an email with your info and I will get it out to you. Along with a signed photograph of something. All right, so moving on from that. Congrats, Marty. Next, we will get to the Punic Wars. This is an Irad Hardy design. I do have this one. I have not yet played it. This is from SNT number 53 in 1975. Nice cover too. Although it is one I like the image on the cover, but it is one that where the title can kind of get lost because of low contrast in there. So, Marty, thank you. We will get this out to you as soon as possible. And I want it out of my hair, so out it goes. I expect to enjoy SD HistCon, but let's face it, it's never going to be an easy thing to go to because I'm in Ohio, right? If I was in LA or even Seattle, it would be a little bit easier. It's just not going to be easy for me to go there. So, this is Rome versus Carthage. So, does this cover both Punic Wars? It totally does. Might even cover the third one, but the third Punic Wars pretty much the Carthaginians getting curb stomped. This does seem to imply that it's all three. I haven't played this. You'll notice these sort of low info counters. This totally works. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with this. Jason W. clarifies that this does cover the third Punic War as well, but probably not super duper fun for the Carthaginian player. We've got some Syracusans here too. That's interesting. That was a factor in the first Punic War, I think. Was it the second? I could be wrong. And if we look at the map, it's a hex map, and it's a quite nice hex map too. I like this. This is sort of the ultimate evolution. I don't know about ultimate, but this is sort of a very archetypical early SPI style at its best, right? There's not a lot of fancy graphics here. There's not a lot of weird textures. They're all out of Zipatone, but it's a good looking hex map. So, yeah, I don't know much about this. Third Punic War, I mean, like I said, third Punic War is basically Carthage getting curb stomped. So, because at that point, they're hugely disadvantaged. So, this sounds like something sophomores would say, Strigler. So this is one, Irad Hardy, the late, unfortunately, Irad Hardy, who did pass away several years ago at this point, was, I think, quite an interesting designer in sort of the Dunnigan mold. He did a couple of games that I admired tremendously. Clearly was capable of thinking outside the box of traditional wargaming toolkit. He did Outreach. He did War Between the States. Now, War Between the States borrows a lot from War in Europe. So there's that. A lot of the sort of scaffolding that War Between the States is built on is lifted directly out of War in Europe. But then again, War Between the States also has a number of its own interesting things going on. And I owe everybody a video on War Between the States, by the way. So he was an interesting designer. This is worth a play, and I do have this one, so this will get played sooner or later. I like that map. I like that map a lot. Napoleon's Art of War. This is from SNT number 75 in 1979. Now, there's two battles in here, Eylau and Dresden. Eylau, of course, we're becoming increasingly familiar with because everyone is doing an Eylau game now. So the designers here are Bob Jervis did Dresden and Omar DeWitt did Eylau. It's possible I'm related to Omar DeWitt, by the way. I've got DeWitts in the ancestry. I remember this. Yeah, so these are fantastic stories. the Paul Anderson Time Patrol stories. If you have a chance to pick up, there's an omnibus collection of all of them. And then I think there's a standalone novel called The Shield of Time. The Shield of Time is good, but the short stories are really good. And Delenda Est is a really good one. They're all really good. So Napoleon's Art of War. This is one that I got rid of, and then bought again. Fortunately, not for tons of money. This uses the Napoleon at War quad system, is to my understanding. And it's just 2 more battles. I will say that of the 2 Napoleonic quads that SPI did, the one with the better reputation is definitely Napoleon's Last Battles. However, I feel like, and I'm happy to be argued with on this point, but I feel like Napoleon's Art of War has a more interesting battle selection than Napoleon's Last Battles. I understand why they put the 4 battles that they did in there, don't get me wrong. But there's some really interesting battles in Napoleon's Art of War, even though it's not as fondly remembered as Napoleon's Last Battles. Let me put it that way. We're just dumping everything in a baggie here, and we'll deal with it later. So I finished up, between shows, I finished up the side project of Crimean War Quad, which is right here, and which was arrived at in a private deal at Origins, and which unfortunately is missing 2 counters. But no, they were not. In fact, Eylau is in 1807, Dresden is in 1813. So no, they are not related at all, other than being east of France. I mean, that's like the only connective tissue there. I mean, I guess there's Russians and some Germans in both battles, I'll tell you that. So although at Eylau there's not a lot of Germans, it's mostly Russians. So if you look at the order of battle of a bigger Eylau game, you will see some Germans, or Prussians, I should say, but not very many. There's probably more Germans in the French army at that point than there are in the yeah, that might be true. I'd have to think a little harder about that. And as we all know, Eylau is a winter battle, right? So it's kind of the quintessential Napoleonic winter battle. Let me put it that way. I need a baggie. That'll do. So, I do not know a whole lot about the Battle of Dresden. Eylau, I think that this is one of those things where maybe they both claimed victory. It's really a it's really a Pyrrhic French victory, right? All right, so looking at the components here, we've got 2 maps. This is what it looks like. This is another one that I had and got rid of and bought again. So here's Dresden, big city Dresden right in the middle, and here's Eylau out in the middle of basically nowhere, except there's a big crossroads, and it's not a winter colors, but it's also 1970 whatever, so there's that. And the counters are this, it's the backside, I hate that. No, this is the front. It only looks like the back. So the SPI did this style of counters in a number of games, and I don't like them. I think Wellington's Victory may have been one of them. I don't own SPI's Wellington's Victory. I have the TSR version, which does something like this. I don't like this style of counter. I see where they're going with it. I don't think it's necessarily a horrifically bad idea, but it's hideous, and I don't like it. So, and we do have Russians and Prussians and some Austrians at Dresden, which also makes sense. So I don't think these aren't the worst looking counters I've ever seen. Let me put it that way. But mine is unpunched. I would like to try this out at some point. And if I like it, then I might run down Napoleon at War. Did they do? That's worth a look. Did they do a boxed version of Napoleon at War? Simpubs in the UK may have done one. It's not listed here under BGG. I don't consider this definitive, however. So, similar in idea, yeah, but the Kaiser's, I can read these, though. I can't read the Kaiser's battle I can't read the Kaiser's battle counters. So William Ahrens mentions that Dresden and Leipzig are both in Saxony. And so, I mean, in some sense, the culmination of the entire Napoleonic Wars period is at Leipzig. And then it all happened, but, you know, it is in danger of happening again. And then that's why we have Waterloo. So if we look at Napoleon at War, we've got Marengo. There's relatively few games on Marengo, and I'm not sure why. Ian Auerstadt, which is a fascinating battle, Wagram, which is a good battle, and the Battle of Nations, which is Leipzig. So in this, you know, the mix with Napoleon's Art of War fits really well into the Napoleon at War quad. And if you have both, you've got a really very nice package of 6 games. Am I friggin' nuts here? Or is that not a flat box? That is absolutely a bookcase box in this picture. And yet BGG does not list it as being boxed. There's websites you can go and check that. And again, this system is not as well regarded as Napoleon's Last Battles, but it doesn't suck as far as I could tell. So we will try Napoleon's Art of War Napoleon's Art of War, and then we'll run this quad down if we like it, preferably in the box, but we'll see what we can do. The bookshelf boxes always run higher than the flats do, or the magazine versions, much less. All right, now we got some interesting news on this. All right, so yep, that's a good point. Ney versus Wellington's another one like this, as Robert Maxey points out. Why is my water on the floor? I don't know why my water's on the floor. I mean, this is the genesis of the NATO symbology, right? The bandolier, the sash for the cavalrymen is the slash, and the X for the infantrymen are the bandoliers. That's where the symbology comes from. It's not the symbology that's the problem. It's that sort of idea where they cut with the slash or the X covers the entire counter. I have not seen an example where I thought that looked good. Let me put it that way. I think in principle you could do it. I don't think it works here. So, this is true. I am good enough with Inkscape that I would, if I would probably not do this, I would probably try and color match as closely as possible and make my own cover sheet for a box. I probably would do that. All right, so this is Year of the Rat, Easter Offensive 1972. Notice the release date, 1972. John Prados had giant cojones to publish this game on the Vietnam War while this actual thing was happening. So very few designers have managed to pull that off, and this is well regarded. This is, in fact, coming back from Decision Games. They're going to do this in a deluxe edition. And when they've done like old SPI games in a new deluxe edition, they've like with Battle for Germany or the First World War, they have generally done a very nice job with it. So I have high hopes for this. It's probably at least 2020. I think it's 2026. So, yeah, he did. He totally did. In fact, that was one of the things that inspired me to take Napoleon at War a little more seriously. So, yeah, so this is an intriguing looking game. And if you look at the map, you'll see that it covers basically all of South Vietnam. This is the Easter Offensive in 1972, by the way. And again, this is relatively early SPI, but I think, you know, considering this is not a map that would fly today, but if you consider that this is 1970 friggin' 2, I think this map looks quite nice. And then we look at the counters, and the counters are fine too, actually. Kind of weird color choices here, I think, but you know, color choices, you got what you got, right, in 1972. They're lucky to get 4 colors out of the 4-color process. This is before the treaty. The treaty's, it's 75. Am I right about that? I think it's 75. I would describe this as operational. I see brigades and divisions here personally. So I would describe this as operational at a glance. So, Mean Joe Green mentions that SPI ads also appeared in Analog Science Fiction magazine. I remember my first. I'll tell the story in a minute. I have an anecdote here, folks, that's coming up pretty much next, actually. So next up in the best of the rest of SPI is the one thing that I decided to pull out. This is Paratroop. I will pull this down for this purpose. All right, so I grabbed this out. This is not my original copy. Who knows where that went? This is one I picked up from, I think, Enterprise Games a few years ago for a very reasonable price. This is S&T number 77, and it was released in about 1979. Am I right about that? Yes. There's 3 games in here, Eben Emmel, Crete, and Red Devils, all with the Paratrooper theme. John Butterfield designed Red Devils. Joe Perez, who is, a regular here, did Eben Emmel, and Jim Dunnigan did Crete. They are all completely different systems, and even to the extent of using completely different counters and stuff. And just look at this friggin' ad, man. Look at this ad. Wow. Look at that ad. That ad just, I love that. That's just amazing. I didn't pull the counters and the map. I'll look at those on BGG. That makes more sense. But this was my first exposure to hobby gaming of any kind. And I was exposed to it by seeing an ad for S&T in Science News magazine, which was this like little 16-page or so magazine that used to come out weekly back in the day. And I think it's still around, but it's a website now. And this was super appealing, and I managed to talk my parents into getting me a 3-issue subscription or whatever was available at the time. And I remember getting the big flat SPI flat plastic tray, which I thought was a marvel at like 9 years old. And the first game that came was Paratroop. So I have extremely fond memories of this, although I'm positive we weren't playing it correctly back in the day. So I would like to revisit this, right? See what Joe and Dunnigan and John Butterfield were coming up with here in 1979, and kind of compare that to my memories of those games, right? This was a long time ago at this point, and I think I got the magazines in 1980. That sounds approximately correct. That seems to make more sense timeline-wise for me, because even at the beginning of 1980, I would have been 9 years old. So this is a mix. Let me put the slideshow back up. There we go. Okay. So here's the counters. Okay. We've got Eben Emmel up here. We've got Red Devils over here, and the whole bottom section is Crete. So you can see that Crete is a battalion level game, and the other two are more abstract. And in fact, Red Devils is a squad level game, as I recall. Companies, and then Eben Emmel is squads. So these are tiny squads. You got the Belgian troops and the German troops and a whole bunch of markers. And then, of course, Red Devils, you got the Germans and the British. So, and then for Crete, you've got a whole bunch of stuff. The Crete game, which is the Dunnigan game, looks intriguing to me now with many years of additional experience. So, I mean, I have more memories. So remember that around this time, not much longer after that, SPI went away, right? So by the time I started getting into other war games, the SPI stuff was gone. We were starting to see the TSR stuff, and what was on tap was Avalon Hill. So my memories from the 80s of playing war games are mostly of Avalon Hill games. But then I have, memories of playing RPGs in the 80s as well. And that's a bit of a different story that I'm not going to go into right now. But I would love to take a look at this just to reflect on how I remember this thing. And again, I'm sure we weren't doing it correctly. Versus what it looks like to me now as a relatively experienced, if basically incompetent wargamer. So, no, I don't think so. No, I do not think so at all. So, at least it doesn't look like it to me. I mean, there's no factors on these counters, right? There were factors on Hell's Highway counters. Remember, Hell's Highway is coming back as well, too, from New England Simulations. And I think we might be seeing that in next year sometime. Mandarin Mike stopped wargaming in 1990 and came back in 2017. That's a big gap. That's a bigger gap than me. I stopped in the late 90s, or maybe 2005, I think, is when I basically stopped playing, and then I like dumped everything a couple years after that. And then around 2007, that's about right. Around 2007, 2008, 2009, I started, or maybe it was 2010 or 2011. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little harder. I want my head says 20. No, it was about 2007. And then I started to get interested in it again and got back in, right? Thanks to people like Stuka Joe and Derek Case and, Joe Stedman, people that were making YouTube videos, right? We wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. So, I mean, it was a big blow, right? Losing SPI was a big blow. There were I want to liken the situation to sort of a DC versus Marvel thing where like there were DC people and there were Marvel people in the fan bases. And while some people did both, some people stuck with one or the other. A lot of people stuck with one or the other, or mostly one or the other, right? So, you just cut the legs off of 33, I'm oversimplifying the math here. You just cut the legs off like a third of the hobby. That's going to hurt. Right? No wonder there was a big slump that we really just started to recover from in the 2000s. So, all right. So moving on from Paratrooper. Oh, and here's the maps, by the way. You can see, unfortunately, it's sideways BGG. I get my pictures rejected from BGG for making them sideways. But this left-hand section is Crete, and you can see it's in a couple of different sections that are sort of connected by these transit boxes. And then if you go up here, you will see Ibn Emel, and here's the big fort, right? And then down here, you will see Red Devils, which, of course, is the British 1st Airborne at Arnhem. And okay, it's kind of buried in the woods here, but the Arnhem is up here, and here is Arnhem Bridge, right? So interesting looking game. I would think this is an interesting looking game now. Let's sort of like a mini quad, right? That by itself is kind of cool. Much less having had the history with this thing that I had, right? Stuka Joe said he had, when SPI folded, he had an order for Empire of the Middle Ages. Now, see, if you paid for it, they should have, TSR should have fulfilled it because they took over the inventory. Now, they didn't because they were dicks. But, what are you going to do, right? All right, here's another one, The Crusades. This is another Richard Berg design. And we've talked about this one before in other contexts. So this is a pretty interesting game and definitely a spiritual predecessor, although the mechanics are not really similar, to his much, much later card-driven point-to-point game, Onward Christian Soldiers, which I've played and which I think is very good. This is structurally very similar. Clearly, a lot of the research that Berg did for this thing later went into Onward Christian Soldiers, except this fits in a magazine and has a hex map. And I think I'm unfortunately missing a couple of pieces to it. Was this one of the ones... Oh, God. That's a close-in map. Was this one of the ones where SPI was experimenting with glossy counters, I wonder? Because my counters are super glossy. And I don't know if they came that way or if somebody put contact paper on them. Either one of those things could be the case. So, hey, nothing wrong with both, right? I'm a fan of both. I don't know if I'd call this a classic, but I would call this a fairly interesting looking game. This also covers the first, second, and third Crusades, okay? So, to me, personally, as somebody who was really big into the Crusades at one point, the second Crusade, not a ton happens. The third Crusade is the one everybody's heard about with Saladin and Richard the Lionhearted and all that. But to me, the interesting Crusade is the first Crusade, because you've got all these different European armies sort of streaming into the Holy Land, and a bunch of different Muslim factions there already. And it's an ideal multiplayer situation. And that's how this thing treats it. And that's how Honored Christian Soldiers does it as well. So while I haven't played this, it again is on the list of things I would like to do. So Did I get a look at the counters? I don't think I did. Here are the counters, and I can't tell from this thing, but this doesn't look glossy to me. These don't look glossy. I think I need a replacement copy of this, to be honest about it. Fortunately, they're not terribly expensive. So, and mine is missing a couple counters anyway. So I could take the magazine, throw the existing components away, get a replacement, and keep the magazine for reading purposes. There's good stuff in it. So, yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm boiling it down into a sentence here when I say nothing happened in the Second Crusade. That's not quite true, but I find that the Third Crusade is the one that everybody thinks is interesting, and I think the First Crusade is at least as interesting. I also have on Kingdom of Heaven from MMP and have not even really looked at it at all. So the interesting thing here, is the Berg design that he later rolled into Onward Christian Shoulders, which is, again, a point-to-point card-driven game with different decks for the different types of gateways you can play it. So, cool-looking game. Next up is Wolfpack. This is a Jim Dunnigan design. This appeared in S&T 47 in 1974. This is another one that, was there an attempt to redo this? There's a new game called Wolfpack coming from GMT, but that's not the same as this. This is another solitaire game. It's another very early solitaire game. And if we look at the map, we will see that there's definitely some kind of search and destroy algorithm happening here. Kind of a cool map, to be honest. And then if we look at the counters, do I have an image of the counters? Yes. Very interesting color choices. And again, 1974. These look great for 1974. So there's that. So you got allied units, and clearly you've got some convoys here and some destroyers and some air. And then for Germans, you've got basically all U-boats and what I take to be some leaders as well, and a variety of different markers. This is one that I don't have. I would probably be interested in acquiring. This person wants $60 for it. I think that's a bit on the high side, but again, it's a reasonably early S&T, and maybe it's a little harder to get. Yes, Mike Berticelli's Wolfpack. Mike's not here tonight, but Mike's Wolfpack is going to be, I mean, same basic idea, right? But very different implementation. I don't think that Crusader Rex looks all that similar. And it's Kingdom of Heaven, while not an incredibly detailed game, definitely looks more detailed than Crusader Rex. So, yes. First Crusade, pretty sure. First Crusade. This is, I assume we're talking about Frederick Barbarossa, who falls off his horse crossing a river and in full armor and drowns. I am reasonably sure that timing is First Crusade. I might be wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at any of that. So, yeah, but yeah, mine's missing a couple pieces too. So I really just need to replace it. Wolfpack for $21 on eBay right now. It's not particularly, the Crusades is not particularly expensive. This is a little more, but somebody wants 21 for it on eBay. That's not bad. That's not bad. I'd consider, again, 15 for most issues of SPI S&T, $15 to $25 is kind of where I want the price to be. There are exceptions where things go well over that. And we're talking about unpunched here, right? So, no, the timing is right for the Second Crusade, 1190. So maybe I'm misremembering it. That's very plausible. He was late to the party, though. So that was a plot point in an Ars Magica campaign that we ran at one point. So in any case, Wolfpack looks fairly interesting. I think this is probably worth a look, and it's one of the of the ones we're covering tonight. It's one of the better regarded ones. Next up is Tannenburg, another fifth wheel game. In this case, it is a fifth wheel out of Great War in the East. Design here is by David Isby, who I'm not sure I've ever actually played anything of his, but he was a very important figure early on, in the early days, at least, of SPI. This isn't, if unpunched, this is not bad. That's not too bad. So the problem is I'll pull Kingdom of Heaven up here, and I can actually show it. Let me go over here. All right. So cool looking box, although not really typical of MMP, and it's a point-to-point game. Okay. I don't really see a problem with this map. If Mark Mahaffey is the artist, I can see where all the spaces are. I can see where the connection points are. It's possible there's some kind of color gradation that is links the different spaces that is hard to read here, but I'm not seeing it in this particular image. I don't think there's really, at a glance, I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. So, and the counters are also very colorful. We have a scan of the counter sheets. I'm not crazy about, here's a shot of the counters. I'm not crazy about these counters. I don't think they're awful. I think there are some contrast issues in places. Like right here, you've got this number 4 in the bottom corner, and I think that number could be a little bigger, especially since it kind of bleeds into the cell shading effect of the art on the counter. So Greenfields Beyond I knew was Isby, but I've never played that either. Adam Misnick says 1190 was Third Crusade. I'm not remembering any of the actual dates at this point. So Third Crusade sounds correct. I don't know. I was thinking First Crusade, but then I thought about it as soon as after I said it. I'm like, it's not First Crusade. That's not right. Third Crusade sounds right. So look, I don't think so. I mean, broadly, yes, I think so. But I mean, the SPQR counters, I think we're still on the Roger McGowan counters, to be honest. So for SPQR, unless they've been redone. And if they have been redone, then they're very similar to Roger's original counters. I don't really see any kind of significant graphical problem with this game. I think the counters are not amazing, but they're colorful. And if I can tell them apart, I'm a happy guy. So back to Tannenburg. All right. This is the fifth wheel from Great War in the East, and it is Tannenburg. And this is supposed to be quite a good game, as far as I've heard. I will say it's relatively late. This is 1978 S&T number 69. You'll notice that we had the early counters, like American Civil War. We had these big, bold numbers on there. And here late, now admittedly, there's more numbers on these counters. Here in the late SPI period, we've got very small NATO symbols and very small type. And frankly, I've been staring at these all night because the Atlantic well counters look a lot like these as well. And I think that was them trying to compensate for registration problems so they didn't have to hear as many people complaining about badly registered counters. The gutters on these counters are pretty big, right? So yes, there's I don't know what game it is, but there is a game that's like this, actually. Or at least that's a suggestion in the rules. So, and yes, this is a battle of maneuver. Der Weltkrieg simulates this situation extremely well, by the way. Good cover. See if I can get a picture of them, like a good image of the map. Not really. There's no panoramic shot of the map here, unfortunately. One of these days, I'll do one of these shows and have all the graphics preloaded and just have like, click, here's the counters, click, here's the map, here's the cover, boom, boom, boom. That'll be great. So again, if you're a fan of Great War in the East, maybe this is something that you want to take a closer look at. And lastly, this is interesting that this is the top game. Remember, it's not the top game, but it's the top game that we're covering tonight. is Jim Dunn Against France 1940. This was, of course, later picked up by Avalon Hill. And in fact, this cover... Yeah, okay. So this is the original S&T cover, and it looks pretty muddy, but it's black and white image from World War II, so maybe that's the best they could do, but at least the cover stands out, so there's that. And then the image that we just saw is the much better known Avalon Hill edition, which is this thing. I wonder if this is a Roger McGowan cover. Let's see if that's listed here. It might be. Well, it's not. So thanks, BGG. But once again, here's France 1940. These are the Avalon Hill counters, obviously. You'll notice the center nibs, at least not on every counter, so that's good. If nothing else, they did have occasional registration problems. What annoyed me the most about Avalon Hill's counters were the center nibs more than anything else, and the fact that they punched and clipped very sloppily. They're not fundamentally bad counters, but you'll also notice even on this image, see this counter right here is more rectangular than this counter right here. That's annoying, but what are you gonna do? So this is I think a game that a lot of people played back in the day. It doesn't really seem to be getting a lot of attention nowadays. So, yeah, they didn't put a space after the comma. I'm not sure what's up with that, but I would think that looking at new Avalon Hill First Edition, take that condition with a grain of salt at $35. That sounds approximately correct to me, right? I expect to pay, again, many exceptions, but for your average Avalon Hill game, honestly, the prices are $40 to $60 nowadays for a lot of them. Plenty of them are more than that. Yep. Then again, I've bought games from GMT in the last year that also have this problem where there's counters of different sizes, not intentionally. So I'll continue to complain about Avalon Hill counters. Don't get me wrong, but still. All right. So Drew Detterer. Drew, thanks for stopping by. France 1940 gets high points for simulation, but the game starts with France already outflanked. That sounds unappealing, I have to say. Here is the situation. Shit. Do we have a good shot of the map here? Let's see if we do. This will have to do. This isn't bad. So you can see kind of what's going on here, right? You've got the channel up in the upper left, and you've got the Germans coming in through the Low Countries, and it's 1940. So, this is a difficult, I've said this before, I feel like I'm repeating myself. This is a difficult campaign to simulate, okay? Lots of attempts to simulate this have kind of fallen down. One noteworthy attempt that's relevant now, because a new edition of it just came out, is Mark Simonich's France 40. That's supposed to be a pretty good game. I would like to try that. I did not pick it up at Origins, and I probably should have. By the time I remembered, I had kind of already blown the budget. So there was that. My personal favorite game on this topic is the Blitzkrieg Legend from OCS and MMP, but OCS has a lot more tools to simulate the command efficiency differences between the French and German armies in this campaign. This, I'm not sure how it does it. I can vouch for Fall of France, having looked at that. That's very sloppy in terms of, well, I don't want to say sloppy. Sloppy is not the right word. Because the system wasn't built to accommodate that situation, it doesn't have any of those tools. And consequently, I think it is a kind of an awful game on the topic. I would much prefer Case Yellow, which I think is a Ted Racer game, as I recall. I haven't played it, but I'd give it a shot. Or France 40 or Blitzkrieg Legend. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So there's that. Wise Guy History. Nathan, thanks for stopping by. Played the combined game from France 1940s. The rules force the Allies to initially push to the dial line. That's interesting. My question about the new edition of France 40 is there a combined game, or is it kind of still two separate games in the box? This is a good catch too. Actually, Vince Ree mentions the GMT victory in the West. I forget who designed that. David James Ritchie, perhaps. Vince Ree prefers that game. Joe Hammond says it's art by Simonson, so we'll take his word for that. This is true, and part of the thing was he was like 69 at the time, which for the Middle Ages was pretty ancient. Something like that. Robert Maxey mentions that Kursk uses the same system. That's interesting. So, yeah, Nathan, do not listen to Nimrods who leave you comments. That's all I saw your post on Facebook today. Do not listen to Nimrods. Ever. So, all right. So, so this is believable. France 1940 suffers from the premise that the French lost because they were bad. There are certainly problems that led to the French defeat, right? But like tactically, the French were quite competent. That was not the problem at all. The problem was the leadership let them down, the politicians let them down, everybody let them down except for the dude with the rifle. Also, their tanks had some issues too, like the hand crank turrets and things like that. That made it a little more difficult for them to keep up. So, odd colors. Yes, I would agree with this. It is odd colors. That the tan are French, this lurid pink are the British. The Germans are blue. That was pretty typical for Avalon Hill, to be honest about it. That sounds intriguing. 6 alternate German alternate orders of battle. That sounds interesting. That could potentially make it interesting, although it might not. It might also make it frustrating for some people. So, all right. So Ken 10 and Wise Guy History says that there is a combined game, which is good. So I would prefer to play the whole thing out. So, yeah, okay, I was right about that. Good, I remembered it correctly for a change. Fair enough. Yeah, I've never really closely looked at that Victory in the West game, actually. Although it's awkwardly named, right? Because there's a series of games called Victory in the West, and they've got nothing to do with that thing. So that is on paper, at least, that's attractive. And again, you should not have to pay a bundle of money for this. What does BGG Marketplace seem to think France 1940 is worth? Did we look at this already? $35. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's a pretty good price, assuming that's not an empty box, and that it's unpunched. All games are new, still in shrink wrap. If this is in the shrink wrap at $35. That's a very good price. Very good price. This is a generic description, however, and not a subscription specific to this game. So. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these Avalon Hill sort of classics from the 70s, there's some bias on my part in saying it this way. Like Luftwaffe, and I mean, some of them are from the 60s. I mean, you really should count things like Afrika Korps in there, Afrika Korps and Waterloo in there as well. Luftwaffe and Richthofen's War and a number of these other games from the general period of 65 to 75, I guess, from Avalon Hill, some of which didn't come out from Avalon Hill until a little bit later, like this, are games that a lot of people cut their teeth on, right? So what does the versioning information and BGG say on this? They're saying Avalon Hill 72? Maybe it was that fast. Most of the SPI imports to Avalon Hill came along several years after the original SPI games. So, that's interesting. Historical booklet. I'm a sucker for this kind of thing, right? A good historical notes. One of the really, I think, groundbreaking things to appear in the last couple of years, and I'd love to see more traditional war games take note of this. Votes for Women. This thing, I got an unboxing video. Check out the unboxing video. I'm not going to pull it off the shelf. But that comes with like a bunch of different documents and literature from the period. It's awesome. So a historical background booklet like this, or like, honestly, Decision puts in their games a lot. I really like that. I like that as a feature. It's not necessarily a make or break feature that's going to make me buy the game, but There were other games with round counters. That wasn't the only example of a game with round counters that Avalon Hill did. However, I am also not an enormous fan of the round counters, so I am happy to stick with my square counters if that's okay with you. Yeah. Okay. See, this is what made me think it maybe was very early 70s because I've seen this in the slipcase. And I want to say that 72 might have been the last year that they did slipcases. Maybe. I have 2, I think, games in slipcases, one of which is Origins of the Second World War, the other of which is Luftwaffe. So the Longest Day had round counters as well. So, Carl, and I appreciate that. I mean, the gamers have always been really good about including substantial historical notes and designers' notes and all that stuff. And I really appreciate it. I mean, that's why that's what sold me on Last Chance for Victory, because I downloaded the scenario book with all that stuff in it. And it's like, there's tons of scenarios, which I liked. And I was at the time feeling particularly bummed about the lack of scenarios in 3 Days of Gettysburg. And then there's brilliant historical notes, brilliant designers' notes in that. It absolutely sold. That is what sold me on that game. So, Mr. Mark Herman, thanks for stopping by. The slipcase version, yeah. I would think the second edition is probably the one that's just the regular box, and this first edition from 72 is the one in the slipcase. It says show dimensions. Do we really have that? We really do. Huh. How about that? I cannot endorse this practice strongly enough, by the way. That is great. I think it's really important. So for a number of reasons. One, I want to know where, if I'm like looking at a game that I'm looking at for the first time, I want to know where the designer's coming from on the design, right? What are the things that the designer thought was important? I might look at that on, in a digital version and say, no, I think this is wrong. I don't want to buy this game now because I think the designer has gone in the wrong direction. That has happened. It's also happened that, hey, I really appreciate the depth of analysis that, in this case, Dean was doing here. This is going to be a really awesome game. And I didn't buy it during that initial thing where they tried to time the pre-orders on the anniversary of the battle or something like that. I bought it later, but it was still in print at Avalon Hill when I bought it. I may have bought it through NWS thinking about it. Pax Britannia, which I also have now, does have triangular counters and hexagonal counters and round counters and square counters. For a game like Pax Britannica, I can kind of live with that. It's not like it's got a hex grid, right? So, White Box D&D and Chainmail Plus expansions for Russian campaign, France 40, and Luftwaffe. Oh, Mike. You could buy a cheap car with what White Box early edition anyway, a White Box D&D runs nowadays. So, whereas Russian campaign, I would not touch Russian campaign for more than $40, depending on condition, but that's kind of where it tops out to me. And that's not the market price. That's where I would go. And that's because, my reasoning for that is that it was in print for 1 million years in multiple editions. It's now been redone by 2 separate companies and reimagined by one of those 2 separate companies. It's an incredibly influential and important game. I think everybody played it. It's also hard to find copies of Avalon Hill Russian campaign in good condition. Same deal with Panzerblitz, because everybody played it. Nobody stuck it on a shelf and treated it as a trophy. Yes, there will be an entire booklet of historical background and essays in Last Gamble. I am very excited about it. Yeah, I mean, in a game like this, it doesn't really bother me because they're air counters, and you probably don't need that many of them at any given time. So, I heard something about somebody buried the box in baking soda for a week, and all the smell was totally gone. Not for this game specifically. Oh, wow. Yeah, I suppose that's right, isn't it? I didn't even think of it. But yeah, this is July 1st, right? So absolutely. I am a huge fan of bibliographies because if I'm interested in the topic, I might want to go run some books down, right? So yeah, I'm a big fan of bibliography. Personally, I'm a big fan of bibliographies in games. And I mean, I mind Mark's bibliography in Empire of the Sun for several books. So yeah, magic cards. Don't even get me started on this topic. You could literally buy a house with what I had for a really fancy house for what I had in magic cards back in the day. So dryer sheet in the game box should help too. I don't know. It's probably worth doing that before you bury the whole thing in baking soda. My wife bought a case of baking soda when the dog got hit by the skunk. So I was not here to deal with it. I'd have to look into this. This is not something I am familiar with. I wish they would. Well, you know, this is not a. I understand that Carl's got a voice on the inside of this, but I don't think Carl's got the power to make this call. Let me put it that way. I hope that didn't come out the wrong way. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. We're actually shockingly not behind, but it is also 10 p.m. And I've managed to spray Atlantic well counters all over the room at least once. Dawn of the Dead, obscure SPI properties. We should do a show on SPI's science fiction and fantasy entries, a decent number of which I have at this point, although I don't own any of the Ares games. And that's a decent chunk of them, actually. That's something to look at. Yeah, that's something to look at. Yes, there we go. There we go. I know exactly what you mean. And frankly, the bibliography in Last Blitzkrieg, too, for that matter. I bought a couple books off that list. So, all right, folks, we are basically out of time here. So, tomorrow we will be on air with Dan at 7:30 p.m. Eastern with our very special guest, Mr. Carl Parody. Minimally, there is a video that's already edited and uploaded for next week. That's the storage solution video for War in Europe. This week, I have the loot video to edit, not edited yet. It is all filmed, not edited yet. It's sloppy because I did it the day I came home. That was a terrible idea. I was like, I sound like I'm intoxicated. It was not a great viewing experience. I'll see what I can do. There's also the unboxing video for the Greatest Day Utah Beach. That is the top priority because that is going to come out on Thursday, which of course is July 4th. Otherwise, I am actually taking Wednesday and Friday off as well. So I intend to have a 5-day weekend. We'll do something with the wife and we will stay away from the internet as insofar as is possible. And there's shorts scheduled all week too. The shorts are supplemental, folks. They're not taking the place of other videos. Some of the shorts are on topics that I intend to do other videos on. So I'd like to wish everybody a great rest of the night. We will see everybody again next week. And thanks to everybody for coming out. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and all that. Everybody have a good one.